Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to introduce to you the hero of Richmond and Petersburg, General Ulysses S. Grant.
I cannot ask for a greater commander-in-chief than our President, Abraham Lincoln. He has supported the Army in every way and anything that I've asked for. I, too, like these two gentlemen, were an Illinois citizen at the time of this great outbreak of our Civil War. April of 1861, I was merely a clerk in my father's leather goods store in Medina. At that time, President Lincoln had only been in office for a month, and Senator Douglas was now supporting the cause of the Union. Neither one of these gentlemen knew me, but when I went down to the Springfield Capitol to seek a commission, they had just left months before. They had never heard of me at this point. I had to ask for a commission because of my West Point and Mexican War experience, but Governor Yates sent away for my record in Washington, found out that I had been drinking as a young officer and had been left the service under a cloud of drunkenness. Now, I admit I had done that at that time. What else had officers had to do in California at that? Well, that record haunted me for the rest of my life, unfortunately. But I finally did get my commission from Governor Yates and was then promoted to general and began a campaign in Tennessee, won the first battles of the war for the North. Won on the successful battles at Shiloh, Fort Donelson, Vicksburg campaign, Chattanooga, and others. And Mr. Lincoln kept promoting me, and others said, "Why are you doing this? Man's a drunk." And Lincoln would tell him, this man, I cannot spare this man, he fights. And the newspapers chose to report it a bit differently. They said, "President Lincoln says, find out what brand of whiskey Grant drinks and send a barrel to my other generals." As you can say, it was much more a sellable newspaper. Well, Mr. Lincoln at that point sent spies to my camp. Now, he called them coordinators to see if Grant really was that drunk. And they reported back to him, "No, sir, he's quite sober. How can he be winning these victories if he was a drunken sod? Your other generals, quite sober, can't win victories. How do you think he's doing so?" And with that, President Lincoln said, let's promote General Grant to command of all the armies, give him a 3rd star. And at that point, they invited me to Washington City. This is March 1864. I boarded a train at Louisville, Kentucky with my son Fred. He was 13 at the time. Took that long ride to Washington City, just the two of us. That's a long ride. I was hungry, was tired, and I needed a bath. But they said, when you get to town, General, be sure to check in at the Willard Hotel. Now, if any of you have been into Washington, it's that fine hotel near the White House with the big columns, and it's where all the dignitaries and congressmen and diplomats stay when they're in town. So I walked up and asked for a room. The clerk apologized and said, "No, we have a dignitary in town who's reserved all the rooms. We have nothing befitting a general." "What do you have?" He mentioned a small room on the 2nd floor, and I said, "I'll take it. I'm hungry, I need a bath." Bet. He handed me the registered book to sign in, and I did. U.S. Grant and Son, Galena, Illinois. Passed it back to him, and I'll never forget his face. His eyes got this big, jaw dropped. He said, "You're the fellow we reserved all them rooms for." The thing is, nobody recognized me because only the generals in the Eastern campaigns would get their pictures in the paper. I, on the other hand, fighting in the West, never got any of that publicity. Although whatever was in there was usually wrong and inaccurate, such as the time they published a picture of myself, I think it was in the Chicago Tribune, holding a cigar. Well, I never smoked cigars. Some other general. I'm sure your newspapers are more accurate today.
So
And so as a result of this, I started receiving boxes of cigars from a grateful northern public. Bag loads of cigars. Train car loads of cigars. What was that to do? Well, anyway, had my bath, went down the lobby to the restaurant there, and ordered up a beefsteak dinner crisp. Do not like raw meat. I don't even like pink meat. I just don't like the sight of blood. Yes, I know, I'm a general. Finally, as I was sitting there, this congressman from Pennsylvania, I believe, he walks by the table and he looks at me, wondering who I was. He said, "Sir, are you General Grant?" I said, "Yes, sir." Figuring he liked to strike up a light conversation and all. But instead, no, sir, he did not. He raised his arms and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, we have with us an esteemed guest today, General Grant." And everybody gets up and comes to my table. And they're pressing on me, and one of them says, "General Grant, you've got to get to the White House right now. President Lincoln is waiting for you." Well, they whisked me away. Here comes my crispy beefsteak. I get to the White House, and they're right. President Lincoln is actually waiting for me at the front door. Now, he's 6'4" with his top hat. He's a pretty tall guy. I'm only 5'8". I'm shaking his hand. Here's his top hat. Shaking his hand. He's shaking mine. And says, "General Grant, I recognize you anywhere." Oh. Well, I think it's, sir, you're the only one. Well, everybody kept pressing on me, so he invited me to the East Room. He said, "General Grant, let's receive the guest in here." Well, that didn't work either. They just come pressing in. I'm only 5'8", so they couldn't see me. At this point, the president gave me my first order. It's an order your mother would not give you. General Grant, stand on the sofa to receive the guests. And I did. You know, standing on the sofa is the most dignified thing, and I'm sure those Washington newspapers the next day, "General Grant is drunk again." Got off that one. Well, the next day we did have a fine ceremony, and got my third star, and President Lincoln said to me, "General Grant, every night this week we have a party or reception planned for you. And at the end of the week, we'll put you in that nice office in the War Department." "Thank you, Mr. President," I said, but my exact words were, "I've had enough of this show business. I'm leaving town tonight." I said, "Well, where will you go?" I said, "I'll put my headquarters in a tent in the field with the Army of the Potomac, that army that's been being bounced around by Bobby Lee. I'll communicate back to the War Department with the telegraph." "But General Grant, what's your strategy? How are you going to win this war?" "Well, sir, we have the manpower, do we not? We have the weapons, we have the resources, we have the railroads. Why aren't we using them?" "Well, we are." "No, sir, we attack this point, and the Confederates all rush to reinforce the threatened area. Then we attack this point, and then they all rush over here. Why don't we hit them all places at once? Some place they're going to crack." And he looked at me and he said, "Well, General Grant, I take that as like shearing sheep." Well, I had no idea what he meant. He said, and he explained it, shearing sheep. When you shear a sheep, there's one man who does the cutting, everyone else is holding the leg. That's exactly our strategy. He supported it 100% for the next year. We attacked Robert E. Lee's army, we drove them back into the entrenchments, and then held them like they held in that leg. General Sherman tore through the South, Georgia, the Carolinas, ripping up railroads and industry. The war was coming rapidly to an end. March 1864, a little over a year later, I invited President Lincoln down to my headquarters at City Point near the lines at Petersburg, and set up a nice steamer for him, the River Queen. He and Mrs. Lincoln came down to visit us, and I invited up General Sherman from the Carolinas and Admiral Porter. We met with President Lincoln in the stateroom, and we talked of the war and how we might wind this thing down. And General Sherman is the one who finally popped the question. This is the question we had in our mind. He said, "Mr. President, what do we do if we bag the rebels? How do we hit this thing?" And his instructions were very simple and plain. He said, "Let them up easy. And a week and a half later, I had just that opportunity at Appomattox. We had broke through the lines, pushed the rebels out, surrounded them, and generally had nothing to do but to surrender. And we gave them the opportunity not to go to prison camps, to take their horses with them and just go home. There will be no retribution. And they did. It was very generous terms. Even the general I put in charge of the surrender ceremony did something no commander has ever done in the history of the world that I know of. He, as the Confederates were marching down, the head bowed, to stack their arms and their flags, they heard this noise, a snap. They looked up, and General Chamberlain had the Yankee Army all standing at attention and saluting the defeated army. Never in the history of the world was that good. So much so, after the ceremony, small pockets of blue and gray got together, shared what they had in their haversack, and again, started the process of being brothers once again.
Stepping on this kid's
Company.
Halt. 175th day.
Company front.
April 27th. And I got a gig in Iowa on that day. After that, I won't take any more gigs. You're good.
Wow.
Order on.
Are these our new recruits?
They are, sir. And a motley lot, if you will pardon me for saying so.
Well, I need to ask them a few questions, if you don't mind.
Yes, sir.
Are each of these men over 18?
Yes, sir.
No. Plus these women. I am.
No, sir. There are no women allowed in the Army. Women can sign up. They need to be nurses, seamstresses, cooks,
They pretend.
or laundresses.
No, really, they actually pretend.
Gentlemen, you do look like a woman. None of you have facial hair. You all could be women.
No, sir.
Now, I also need to know if you all have good teeth. You all have good 4 front teeth.
Yes, sir.
Let me see your mouth. What is that on your teeth? Good golly. Well, I expected it would work. Let me see what you have. Let me see. Open up, open up. You see your 4 front teeth? All right, very well. Each of you need to have 4 front teeth in order to tear the paper cartridge in your mouth. You just gotta tear it so you can pour the powder down the barrel. You understand me? If you don't have 4 front teeth, you are not allowed to join the Army. And if you're not allowed to join the Army, we will call you 4F. You're exempt from serving. Now, do each of you know your right from your left?
So, yes, sir.
Let me see your right. Your left. Your right. Your other right. Here's how I'll know. Place your musket in your right hand. No, not pick it up. Just place it right there. Good, good, good. Right, right.
Arms.
And the other right. Okay. Now, in this case only, I would like you to place your musket in your left hand, because I'm going to need to swear you into the Army. Very well. Looks like a very poor lot of soldiers. None of them have leather shoes.
I think Governor Randall has tapped the well once too often.
None of these men have leather shoes or boots. Some are nearly barefooted. Many have short trousers. We're going to give you good wool, long trousers, and brogans or boots made of leather.
Thank you, sir.
And we will be paying you $11 a month. For this, we expect you to serve your country honorably in this rebellion.
Yes, sir.
And to do so, we need to induct you or swear you into the Army.
Thank you, sir.
Put your weapon in your left hand. I want you all to raise your right hand. Right hand. Now here's how I want you to raise it. Like this. Like this. Like this. Nice and solid. And I would like you, I request, that you repeat after me, word for word.
Yes, sir.
I state your name.
Austin.
State your name.
So are half of you are named State Your Name? What a coincidence.
You said the repeated word.
Put your hands up again. Let's try it again.
Hey, go back, sir.
I state your name.
Austin.
Very well. Do solemnly swear
Do solemnly swear
to defend and protect
to defend and protect
the Constitution
the Constitution
of the United States of America.
of the United States of America.
Very well, gentlemen. You are now in the service of the Army. Place your hands down. Congratulations.
Thank you, sir.
Sir, they are now officially yours.
Thank you,
Thank you,
General.
sir.
During the Civil War, the standard way to cheer was hip hip
Hooray!
hip hoozah, hip hip hoozah. And at the very end, there was something that the soldiers called a tiger, but a Wisconsin tiger sounds like this: moo. Okay, so let's give 3 cheers to the best general that ever served the Union cause. Hip hip hoozah! Hip hip hoozah! Hip hip hoozah! And 1 Wisconsin tiger. Moo! Thank you.
I'm Private Tom Drendel, 2nd Wisconsin Company K, and we're here in Janesville reenacting the Civil War history life. And with me we have Corporal John Werle, and we also have Private John Decker. John Decker is from Evansville, Wisconsin. I'm from Marshfield. We fought in 2nd Wisconsin. We were trained at Camp Randall back in 1861 to go fight in the Civil War. We fought in the Virginia area most of the time. We fought at battles that you might know, Antietam, South Mountain, Gettysburg. Those are some of the major battles that we fought at. Bull Run 2, or Manassas, we fought at those. You're watching this on JATV.
Now, we'll give the Senator from Illinois his 5 minutes.
I'm sorry, I just cannot stand by and listen to these assertions by Mr. Lincoln that slavery must not be extended. That's not the issue. Let me explain what happened here. Back in the Congress during 1849, we had been dealing with the Mexican cession because we had just won the Mexican-American War. And at that time, it went into the appropriations bill. Now, appropriations bill means that this is the money that makes a government run. Without the appropriations bill, everything comes to a standstill. Now, that was being passed when Senator Taylor from Wisconsin made a motion about forming a government in Nebraska. And that started 2 people talking in Congress. One of them was Daniel Webster, who was well known. And Daniel Webster's position was, we can't do that. Why can't we do that? Because they are territories, and unless it's a state, the federal constitution cannot be imposed on a territory. So we couldn't do it. Of course, John Calhoun, let's say he was a Southerner, John Calhoun said, of course we can do that. That's what we need to do, because he knew that if we pass the Constitution on the federal Constitution to the state territories, then slavery would go with it, because under the federal Constitution it was part of the package. So this is where we were. Either we decide to give Nebraska a government, which we couldn't do under the law, couldn't do it, or we say, make them a state first, have them form their Constitution, and then they can decide. And that's where we came in with the Kansas-Nebraska Act. That's all I was saying, ladies and gentlemen, was under the Kansas-Nebraska Act, let them decide. Does that sound familiar? Let the people decide. So it wasn't a matter of saving the Union, whether it be free, that it could not survive as free, or all free or all slave, or part and part. It can survive. It could survive, because then it was up to the states to decide whether slavery was going to be a part of it. But we could still be a united Union, a United States. And that's the only thing that he and I agree on. But Mr. Lincoln is saying that this could be done, that somehow we could bend the rules. I'm telling you, this led to the conflagration of 1861 when the Civil War began, because we couldn't resolve it any other way. The law told us in Congress that we could do. So this is where I disagree with Mr. Lincoln, that the extension of slavery had to be stopped. It could have been stopped by each state individually, but not by the federal government without police force in each one of those states saying that you will or will not have slavery. There was no police force behind it. So when you hold Mr. Lincoln, when you wait and just hear him speak about these things, keep this in mind, that he is not above the law. He cannot do things that are outside the law, even if he is 6'4". Thank you.
So if you want to try scrub board, I have a yoke. But yeah, the women moved with the troops then, and a lot of them doubled as nurses. One diary said that she actually did more nursing the last month or so than she did in London. So they could be as close as, you know, a mile behind the lines, depending upon where the battles were. If the men were going into campaign, the women didn't go; they stayed behind. But again, at Shiloh, which was a surprise attack in the morning, 2 Wisconsin officers got killed. They got caught in the crossfire because it was a surprise attack. So it was dangerous, but you know.
Now, you wash them there first before you put them in the hot water? Or
That I have not in the reading. I think this is personal preference, because the scrub board gets the stains out. Okay, if you boil them, that's of course getting the lice and the grime out, but you could set the stain. So whether you get the lice and the grime out, or you get the stains out first, but then you have the bugs in your wash water.
Yeah.
Because, you know, if you're camping and wearing the same shirt for a couple of months, you know, well, Army regulations of the period said that the guys were supposed to have a bath once a week, but that regulation wasn't enforced. So,
no water? How do you
no water, and just the whole cleanliness idea of the period was different. The #1 killer during the war was dysentery. Two guys died for every one guy that died from battlefield-related injury. And that's just bad food and bad water.
That tub over
unclean
there with that
conditions.
stick that go up and down, like some oysters used to have.
Glory, glory, hallelujah, his soul is marching on.
Oh, I'm in trouble. How bad is it, Doc?
During the Civil War, it was the first war in history where all amputations were 100% pain-free. Every soldier was put to sleep with either chloroform or ether. Now, ether was usually used during the day. It could not be used at night because it's very flammable. With candles, it will explode. And sometimes one of the officers come in with a cigar in his mouth looking for it, it would blow up in the building. So they only used ether during the day, and chloroform is what was used most. Oops. He would be out for about 20 minutes with chloroform, but it only takes about 5 to 7 minutes to do this amputation. So, and afterwards we would inject morphine and give him laudanum, so he's going to be pain-free for days. Now, a lot of soldiers wrote back, you know, that doctor is a butcher because they can go by. Now, when I say it's pain-free, he can still be conscious and holler and scream, anticipating pain. Say, doctor, don't take it. So the soldier will come by, well, that guy's a butcher. I'm not going to go to him, but he won't feel a thing. Chloroform and ether clinically kill the nervous system in your brain. Temporarily. That's what it amounts to. You can still breathe, you can move your muscles. The rest of your brain works. It's just the neurological part of it does not. That's what it does. And basically you don't want them completely out sometimes because they can aspirate their tongue, you know, or something else. So when he is out, there would be 3 other people happening. One would be up there giving the anesthesia, one would be over there putting direct pressure up here or a tourniquet. That man would come down here and hold the foot while I amputate and he would tie off the loop. Now, what I am using are real Civil War instruments. This is an amputation. It's still very, very sharp. The first thing that they do would cut through the muscle and down to the bones real quick. The next thing they would do is saw through the bone. Now this is for arms only. It has a knife on one side and fine teeth for sawing through the bones on the other side. This is probably from the Mexican ones before the Civil War. It's triangular shape so my bloody hand won't slide off. Now there's all kinds of amputation saws, like in the kit here there's a solid one. This looks like a meat saw, but I guarantee you it's not. This is so you would take, now normally I have a wooden dowel through there so you can hear me cutting through the bone and I have blood in there. It'd be very, if we were really doing it. People will faint when we really do it. So if it's just, about 4 strokes is all it takes to cut through those bones. Your bones are yellow, they are not white. These are the actual bones. And that's the sciatic nerve bundle, you know, which gives you a good pain in the ass. And these are the arteries. So the first thing that we do when we cut this off is take a tenaculum and pull out these arteries. They're elastic, and then we tie them off with silk thread. Now, veins do not leak blood. I don't know if you know this, but how is the blood from your foot going to get to your heart? It goes inch by inch through gates. So you're only losing that much blood between gates. You never tie off veins because you cannot bleed to them. You only the arteries. Now this is called a circular flap. When we get that done, we would cut this 2 sides off so it would look like that, and you sew it up and that gives you your stump to go for a wooden leg. And they always leave these 2 artery litigations sticking out so day by day you can go and tug on it. And when it really lets loose, you know that the vein is growing back together. And if you pull it out and it's red, you have to go back in and retie it because you'll bleed to death. So that will leave it hanging out. The reason for say amputation at the start of the war was an order in 61 to 62. Any damaged bone by a gunshot wound had to be amputated immediately. You didn't try to fix anything because You want to save him from dying of blood poisoning, which is gangrene. This bone is nothing under there. There's a hole through that. 58 caliber bullet is about that size. It's soft lead and low muscle velocity. It hits a bone. It doesn't go through like modern day, but it splinters it into 50 toothpicks or something. So there's no way it's going to harden to support your weight. That's why they must cut it off, because the wooden leg will work much better. Now during the Civil War, you could have an amputation and you're nowhere near battle. Soldiers got blisters in their shoes, and going through muddy, swampy water with any little cut or blister, and you didn't take care of them for 3 or 4 days, you could get blood poisoning, and they would have to amputate them. So you don't have to be in a battle. Now, after this is done, there's a bandage over there. It takes 10 yards to sew up this stump. I mean, to bandage it. You can put always a wet bandage over any wound, so everything will stay moist. And then you wrap it up here, and it takes 10 yards to do that. Now, the first thing a soldier is going to do when he wakes up, we wake him up with smelling salts and fan his lungs to get air in. The first thing he's going to say is, "Doctor, scratch my toe, it itches." The brain still thinks that foot is there. It's called phantom pain. And for days, he's going to think that it's still there because the brain hasn't gotten. So what they would do after this is bound up, they would have a wooden leg there, or part of one, that they would lay on there so that the mind would get used to something there. And then maybe in a couple weeks he'd be putting weight on there. So they took to a wooden leg pretty fast.
First of all, I have to admit, ladies and gentlemen, of all the introductions I've ever received, that's the most recent. I was struck when the distinguished senator from the state of Illinois was speaking, describing his life, the great list of similarities between himself and myself, which start with the fact we were both born, and from that point it diverged into very opposite directions. I was born in the great state of Kentucky, grew up in Indiana, and of course moved to Illinois when I was 21. My occupations were not as distinguished as the senator from Illinois. I was a flatboater operator. I was a postmaster in a small town called New Salem. I was a surveyor for a while. I ran 2 stores in New Salem, both of which winked out, so I was not very much of a businessman. I was a captain of the militia during the Black Hawk War, which for me is probably the greatest honor that my people, the people from New Salem could bestow upon me. But once I got back from the Black Hawk War, I got into the game of politics. The first time I ran for politics in 1832, I was soundly defeated, but most of the people from New Salem voted for me, and they encouraged me 2 years later to run again. So for the next 4 terms, I was a member of the General Assembly for the state of Illinois, where I was first introduced to the distinguished gentleman from the state of Illinois. His political career skyrocketed. Mine remained quite simply at the state level until 1847, when I was elected a congressman by the Whig Party, which is the opposition to the Democratic Party which he heads. I was there for 2 years. I came back. My political career was over, and I started actually being a family man and a somewhat successful lawyer up to the year 1854, when our paths again would cross. It's called the Kansas-Nebraska Act. Senator Douglas, in his popular sovereignty program, has created agitation beyond belief on the question of slavery, or more exactly the question of the spread of slavery. I am opposed to slavery. I have always been opposed to slavery as a moral wrong, a political wrong, and an economic wrong. But I was quite willing to leave slavery where it was. Senator Douglas, in his zeal to please the people of the South, in the Kansas-Nebraska Act, in about 3 simple sentences of an otherwise great document, by the way, he destroyed one of the most sacred compromises we had ever had in this United States, and that's the Missouri Compromise. For almost 34 years, the Compromise of 1820, or the Missouri Compromise, has pretty well delineated the spread of slavery in this nation. With about less than 4 sentences, Senator Douglas destroyed that compromise and opened all the federal territory, regardless of where they were located, to the question of slavery. At that point, ladies and gentlemen, I could not be quiet any longer. I got back into politics because of my opposition to the spread of slavery and the institution of slavery itself. Certainly, any American who has studied our history would have to believe that our founding fathers had hoped and probably fervently prayed that the institution of slavery would end itself. That, of course, was not this situation. But through the years, this agitation of slavery has been a constant thorn in the side of this nation. And although I certainly do not in any way want to dispel or allow myself to think that I'm speaking harshly of Senator Douglas, those of he and his party who think that the institution of slavery should be allowed in the federal territory, as far as I am concerned, is simply wrong.